about, had to listen to some fucking kid that's never been to the Middle East tell a stage full of people that lived in Israel how much he knew about the conflict. It was the weirdest fucking thing. Hakima, can you imagine if fucking you had a fucking a room full of people where you guys were all from the local Chicago area, and then you had some young kid that came in that watched one YouTube video, read one book about Chicago, and then lectured to you about, I don't know, the crime in Chicago. Would you have a problem?
100%.
Yeah, that's what it was. Fucking guy was a retard. By the end, I don't block people except for Edmund, but I ended up blocking this guy. He was so fucking annoying.
He was crying. He was crying.
Was he crying?
Yes. You caught that, right? Didn't you?
No, I didn't.
You had just came in right after. Oh man, Roger, you would have. That was the topping on the cake on that one. He literally was crying.
What was he crying about?
Adams, you were there, right? Yeah, Adams was there. So I didn't know any between the tears and everything that he was doing. I couldn't figure out what the hell he was bitching about. Something about being unsafe, that he didn't have a bunker. Actually, you came in for that because you're the one that offered him a bunker to build a bunker, right?
Oh yeah, I posted the link. Atlas Shelters. Yeah. They make beautiful bunkers.
Yeah, that was the first time I've ever heard whatever that.
Oh no, you're talking about the guy Ross. I'm sorry.
Oh,
that guy was a troll. This other guy was
Josh.
Yeah. This is Josh that was going off. That was like, I mean, here's the weird thing. Josh is really good at fucking pulling up Wikipedia or fucking Chat GPT, and if you start getting into a topic, he'll go back in 19 blah blah blah, and it's like, dude, let's have a fucking conversation, because you go one layer beyond whatever he fucking said, and then his thumbs don't type that fast, so then he's fucking dead and he can't talk about it. It's just so fucking hilarious. I mean, look, I'm gonna be fucking very candid about this. There might be a half a dozen people on this app that are super well-versed in what's going on in Israel and the history of Israel. I mean, there's a lot of Jewish people on here. There's a lot of people that have lived in Israel. But there's maybe a half a dozen that are, scholarly about it, right? And, if you have real conversation, they'll admit this to you, right? They'll admit it to you. And this fucking little twerp from fucking Ohio that drives a truck that read one book and watched a fucking video. He had to keep prefacing everything by, do you know who Benny Morris is? He's telling a room full of fucking, Israelis and Jews, saying, do you know who Benny Morris is? And then he'll go and he'll give you one Benny Morris quote, and then and then you start asking him, what else he might know about Benny Morris, and then he's done, because his Wikipedia article.
Yeah, he tried going the Noam Chomsky route as well. That didn't work.
Yeah, I was there for that. The Josh guy, right? I was kind of away for a little bit. Yeah, that guy was smart, man.
He's a little twerp. Here's the richest part. You guys are gonna love this. He literally said that I'm a communist sympathizer. And with his commie sympathizing ways, I said, wait a minute, you come in here on this humanitarian mission saying that Israel and the U.S. are somehow doing something wrong, but do you know that in the last century 100 million people died because of communism? And then he's like, oh, those numbers are a little inflated. I go, okay, let's be the most charitable. In China, Mao in the first 4 years killed 50 million people. By the time he's done, it was up to about 65 million. Let me welcome some people up if they want to come up. I see my friend Ken Frankel up in the building. It's so good to see him. I've seen him yesterday for the first time since I've been back. Really cool to see him. But anyhow, this little twerp was trying to tell the room that the CCP has been a net benefit to the people of China. And I go, well, what about the 65 million people killed, the 50 million that were killed in the first 4 years? And he literally said, well, if you look at the population and percentage-wise, it's still a net benefit. It was like, okay, now you're dead to me. I can't take you serious. It's fucking crazy. Let me me get David Katz up here. Ken, what's going on? Can you make some sense of all this stuff?
Well, I looked at the title of the room, and obviously whatever you're just talking about is not the title of the room. So I have no comment on right now anything to do with China because I don't know really what context you're talking about it.
I'm just talking about an uninformed guy that came in here from Ohio. He was a young kid that drives a truck, and he watched a YouTube video with Benny Morris, and he's read one book, forget the title of it, and it didn't sell very well. I remember looking that up. And that was his experience on the state of Israel and the conflict with Hamas and with Iran. And he came in here and lectured an entire room of people that was made up of Jews and diaspora of Jews, as well as people that lived in Israel or formerly lived in Israel. It was one of the weirdest. I mean, Kim, you're probably the best at this, of calling people out that, like, hey, why are we letting this person talk? This person doesn't know anything about. This was the worst offense of its kind ever in history. But because it was like almost comical, we allowed it to happen. And everybody just kind of took turns like shitting down this guy's neck. You would have blew a fucking gasket on the grounds of he knew nothing of what he was speaking.
And then somehow you got to China on this thing. Is that because you were talking?
Yeah. So the same kid that claimed to be an expert on Israel versus Hamas, Israel versus Iran, the history of the region. He can go back thousands of years. He understood the conflict. This same kid, after lecturing the room about how evil Israel and the U.S. is, then went into talking about the virtues of communist China and how communism would save us, and then when we asked him about all the death that the communists brought to China, he said that it was okay because it's been a net because look at where China's at too.
Okay, all right. I don't really have a comment on that because I was you're not talking about the same young man from last night, right? This different guy, right?
This guy was here last night. His name was Josh.
Yeah, that's the guy I'm talking about. Okay.
Yeah. Jesus, if you were there, the conversation would have probably been a lot shorter. We would add.
I tried to shorten it. I don't think I was. Maybe you weren't listening.
I spent a great deal of last night on a casino floor. I apologize if I wasn't.
Well, okay. I hope you did well. No. I tried a little bit because I tried to get. As you know, I tried to get that conversation more narrow because people go all over the map. They were going back to 3,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. And I don't want to go. I don't want to go relitigate that whole thing last night. I mean, it's not really worth it at this point. I mean, my interest was you have a title on the room about the War Powers Act, which is something I've studied since I was a college student. And I'm old, so when I studied it, it was,
Well, yeah. Let's get into this. 1973 does because we could throw out the AUMF because it's not in place, and I don't think it really covers Iran anyway. But the 1973 War Powers Act. I guess the bigger question from your perspective: should Trump worry at all that there's a case to be made that what he did, was outside of the scope of?
Well, you know what? People could always make an argument, but I'm going to tell you what my thoughts are on this. It's that the whole issue of the War Powers Act is they're always difficult issues because you have two parts of the Constitution that arguably are somewhat in conflict. Congress's unique powers to declare war, and the president's powers under Article 2 to be commander-in-chief. When the Constitution was written, people need to keep this in mind. There were no planes. There were no submarines. There were no nuclear weapons. Okay, so when they wrote that, they're talking in their minds. They're talking about the ways that wars were conducted then, with basically ground forces, that are crossing borders. Okay, that's that to them. That was a war. The idea of who gets to decide whether there's a missile attack, okay, that may in fact start a war, or be the start of a war, or maybe it's a one-off, however you want to define this, okay, they couldn't conceive of that, okay? So you have to now balance out the reality of the world that we live in today, including the fact that we do have, weapons of mass destruction, okay? And is it viable, like this situation that happened yesterday, is it viable to go to Congress for something like this? And I would argue it's not, because you need to conduct it in secrecy. Whether you like what Trump did or not is irrelevant. Okay, just let's leave that aside. He did what he did, okay? If you want to conduct an operation like that, okay, how do you need secrecy. You can't debate it with 535 members of Congress, and they have put processes in place. We haven't heard a lot about it on the news, but I do know it happened. They have been all sorts of attempts to try to balance out this congressional power, right? So one of the things that happens in a situation like this, okay, in terms of who gets notified in advance, okay, maybe it's only an hour in advance or 2 hours in advance or whatever. There's something called, it could be a day in advance. It's up to the president, but there's something called the Gang of Eight, which are 8 senior members in the House and the Senate that are the majority and minority ranking members of like the Armed Services Committee and I think maybe Foreign Relations, in both houses that get notified. Okay, so they can say that they notify, that they just didn't, they don't need their permission. They just basically notify them, this is going to take place. And so no, I don't believe he needed it. The more complicated question on the War Powers Act, just to give an example, where I think it's a better debate actually than this thing for now, is when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. This is the Obama administration, and there was a civil war in Libya, and the United States started sending missiles into Libya. And Tim Kaine, who was actually Hillary's running mate when she ran for president, okay? So, you would think generally ideologically aligned. Tim Kaine has been a big advocate of always trying to get the War Powers Act, and saying you need to go to Congress. And so even though Hillary was Secretary of State, she wasn't Secretary of Defense, but nonetheless it was the Obama administration and her that were supporting these missile attacks into Libya. He was saying they need to stop that unless they get congressional authority, okay? And so he was a little bit on the opposite side of where she was. And I think that's a more interesting debate because it wasn't sort of like a one-off. It was a more prolonged, bombing of Libya, trying, they were getting involved in a civil war, and depending on what your views of that are, we don't need to even debate that. I think that's a much more interesting example of where maybe that comes into play. But if you read the language even of the War Powers Act, it still is based on troop movements. It's kind of based on, if you send troops somewhere and you don't have a congressional, the declaration of war, and you don't get a permission from Congress, now you need to pull the troops back, okay? So it's still based on troop movements more than, the types of, significant military stuff that can happen through the air than, in the, current 21st century, that we live at. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
Ken, let me ask you a question real quick, if you don't mind. So I'm just kind of going through the summary of the War Powers Act. It says essentially that it uses the language of within 48 hours, notice has to be given to the Speaker of the House and the President pro tempore of the Senate. Do we still fall within that 48-hour time frame?
Well, they go beyond that, but you see, they go beyond that. They actually go beyond that. I mean, in reality, not only does it talk about this, do they tell the Speaker and the President pro tem, they actually tell, like I said, this Gang of Eight, which is actually a larger group of congressional leadership.
Do we know if that notice has been given to the Gang of Eight yet?
I believe it has. I mean, just the media is just not reporting on it a lot.
I mean, that would help. That would help the president's situation if notice has been given to the Gang of Eight. It would be helpful to know if there's
that's an
some
important
information.
context that's missing, TC. that I feel like is very crucial in bringing to Americans' knowledge. Like,
I
yes,
can lend some insight into this discussion.
Yeah, let's go. Let's get Anson in here. By the way, it's good to see some of you folks here. TC,
Roger Rabbit.
What's happening, brother? Hey, that's actually a really good picture. Is that family you got there
That's
with you?
my wife, yes.
Awesome, man. You look very happy, and so and I like I like to see the changes that I feel like I'm a softer, gentler person, and I feel like you've kind of changed some of your positions over time. And so, anyways, welcome.
Yeah.
But I want to get to Anson because Anson's got a lot of knowledge. For those of you that don't know Anson, let me go ahead and refollow him with my new account. Anson's got experience that most of us will never gain, and probably wouldn't have been able to handle anyways. Anson, go ahead. John.
Gang of 8 is 8 members of Congress, the majority and minority leader of the Senate, that's 2, the same for the House, that's 4, and the ranking member and the ranking minority member of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. That's a 2 each, total of 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. The Gang of 8 has been included in notification of the situation. The news report that I've been watching on Fox says that just before he authorized the attack, or probably when the planes were in the air en route, that Trump, quote, notified Congress. Now, I don't know what that means exactly, but the bottom line is that there was very little, if any, advice, much less consent, sought in the Congress by the Trump administration over the last several weeks, particularly the last 2 weeks when the question of using U.S. Bombing forces to take out the nuclear facilities. There was very little, if any, exchanges. I know that Senator Warner from Virginia, I believe he is the Democrat minority leader of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He specifically was quoted in the press not very long ago that he had not been told anything and nobody had sought his advice, consent, or there's been essentially no communication. So I think it's safe to say that the president and his administration did not make any effort whatsoever to engage Congress seeking their opinion on things. As far as the decision to bomb, that's one thing. But for the last 2 weeks, there has been a lot of debate as to just how far along Iran was in actually having a weapon that they could put on a warhead or an airplane and deliver it to whatever target was in range. And we all know that Tulsi Gabbard basically said they were more than 3 years away, and Trump didn't like that. The Israelis were saying that they were days, if not weeks, or weeks, if not days away from actually having a nuclear weapon. That is a subject that could have been, and in my opinion, should have been thoroughly aired, including holding hearings, all of which would have been very highly classified, but of course subject to leaks. But the understanding and the analysis of the intelligence that was available, that again was strictly within those discussions were strictly within the administration, I'm pretty sure, and that is something that those 2 intelligence committees should definitely, in my view, have been able to have gotten into from the very beginning of this, at least this discussion of the United States taking military action to bomb the nuclear facilities. That's my intake. That's my understanding of things so far. and I'll let you all discuss from here on
And
out.
what's the value of that necessarily? Because if you go back some years ago, we constantly were told that supposedly we understood, like we as a country understood where North Korea was on their development plans, and obviously we were way off, right? Because they kept being told they're close, but they're not that close, and they're close, but they're not that close. And obviously now no one disputes that they have a bomb. So somehow they got to the bomb, but we kept saying they're not there yet. So I always doubt, like, we actually understand what's going on in a foreign country on things like this, okay? And to make these decisions based on, we think they're 60%, we think they're this, or we think they're that, we don't even know. And North Korea, by the way, proves that we had no, we don't know.
Well, first of all, I would say that having the material is one thing. Having a deliverable explosive device that will work is another thing. I don't think there's any debate that Iran has 60 up to 60% enriched uranium-235 or uranium-235, and I think the number is either 900. I think it's 900 pounds, which is more than enough for you can make a bomb with 3 or 4 kilograms, about 2 pounds per kilogram. So they've got plenty of material that it wouldn't take long to put it through the centrifuges to get it up to 90%. And I think all that information is coming from the IAEA, the UN inspectors, as to the amount and the level of enrichment. So I would say that is probably pretty good intelligence, but then again, you'd have to get into the highly classified ways and means and everything else to really get a clear understanding. But to be able to take that material and to put it into a bomb that will actually work.
I understand, but that wasn't my point. We definitely had more transparency because of the IAEA with Iran than we had with North Korea. My point, though, is we're often wrong, okay, about understanding where some hostile country is on developing a weapon system, and this thought process that somehow we could debate this endlessly in Congress before making a decision, when we know that there's we know they're on the continuum. It's not like they're starting at zero, okay? And so where they are on a continuum, and you want to see, let's guess, okay? If you guess wrong, by the time you realize you guessed wrong, they have it, okay? That's the problem, okay? At some point you have to make a decision.
I agree with that, but let me, and I am not advocating in any way that we have a full and open debate in Congress ad infinitum as to the pros and cons of this information. But the way the system is supposed to work, and it doesn't work very well, but the way the system is supposed to work is when intelligence, and I'm not talking about the decision to bomb, I'm talking about the confusion in the intelligence as to whether or not it's right, wrong, or somewhere in between. That the process is supposed to be the intelligence agencies are doing their thing, and the national security operation within the administration, which is Defense, State, and the National Security Council, and all those staffs, they take that intelligence information and distill it. Well, the congressional element of that is supposed to be, and in my view should be, the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, so that Congress gets into the evaluation of the intelligence early on. And I don't think that happened this time, and my point is it should happen, but I'm not in any way suggesting that every member of Congress should be able to get up on the floor of the House and in an unclassified manner try to debate the pros and cons of what the highly closely held intelligence is. But there is a process that's supposed to work, and we can all argue about whether it worked well or not. and that's it for now.
What do you guys, if we had to suspect the next move offensively from the U.S., what's the next target that would?
Boy, oh boy, I'm gonna let the rest of you talk about that. You're asking what's the next step towards the quagmire, Mojo? That's a big question.
Well, we identified the 3 targets that were a must, and of those, there was one target in particular that everyone felt was the most critical. I'm just wondering what, in the level of importance, like what 4, 5, and 6 might look like. Clearly, we would know in terms of the U.S. government as well as Israel. I'm curious if anybody here knows what those are. They additional nuclear sites? Are they places where missiles might be held? I'm just kind of curious what we think might be the next strike, because I don't think we're done. I think Trump I would argue, best speech he's ever given in his life, mainly because he kept it so damn brief. He basically said what had happened, and then he laid it out, the conditions that, hey, if they haven't come to the table to discuss peace, we've got additional targets, God, and then he did the God bless for everybody. But I thought that was the best speech he's ever given. I'm just curious what when he said that there's additional targets identified, what
I think
Can I tell you, Mojo,
Israel
please?
has a very, very good understanding, and because they do, I'm sure we do as well because of sharing intelligence. But where do they store their ballistic missiles? They've got about 2,000 missiles. They did before they started this latest round. They've got about 2,000 ballistic missiles. Where are they blow them up? Where do they manufacture their ballistic missiles? Where do they do that? Blow them up. Same for drones. Where do they keep their drones? Where are the bases that they keep the drones? Drones are harder because you can build a drone in a garage, but like the Ukrainians are doing. But where do they? Because that's the only way they have to actually strike in a meaningful way is through drones and ballistic missiles. They don't have, and if they tried to do a ground attack of some sort against U.S. forces in the Middle East, then with the control of the air that Israel has, they're not going to have much luck. And the first time they raise their head above ground, guess what? We now have 2 carrier battle groups that are in the area, and I'm sure their job is to make sure that there is no overt ground assault that's headed towards the American bases and American personnel around the Middle East. But striking those targets by the U.S. using carrier battle group power projection forces, which they're significant for sure, but that is, everybody says if you just bomb the nuclear facilities and stop at that point, that might be okay. But everybody is concerned about, the mission creep that we all know about in terms of warfare, and mission creep could have us, U.S. aircraft over Iran bombing ballistic missile manufacturing facilities. That's a whole further extension of the war and the war with Iran, and I would advise strongly against our doing it.
What do you think of the strategy that Israel has about taking out leadership? They took out top commanders within the IRGC. There's talk that it's on the table to hit the supreme leader, and then the supreme leaders named all of these different folks for secession planning. I would think that if we've learned anything about how Israel likes to conduct these things, is they want to take out people that are making these decisions and then cause the next generation to think twice. I would imagine that's going to continue to happen. I think that's better done by Israel than by us. I think they do. I don't think there's anybody in the world that does that better than.
Yeah, but that's playing whack-a-mole. let me just hypothesize. Let's say Iran has a bunch of sneaker cells that we don't know about in the United States, and tomorrow morning we wake up and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the director of the CIA, the director of National Intelligence, and the Secretary of Defense, all of their houses were blown up by Iranian terror groups. How long would it take for us to replace those people, and would that severely impact our ability to execute a war against Iran if they did something? Taking out the leadership is something that's neat on the headlines, but that doesn't do a whole lot to degrade the ability of Iran to continue to conduct warfare, because they'll just replace them. I just heard on the news today that the Ayatollah, of course, is in hiding right now, and probably the Israelis know exactly where it is, but that he has already named 3 successors in the event that he is assassinated. And I've also heard that his son is about 10 times worse than the Ayatollah, and he's the heir apparent if the Ayatollah is taken out. So we don't want to get into a whack-a-mole game with Iran thinking that that's going to bring the war to a closure. It won't.
Well, and another thing is, we know that that people that live here, they try to go down as martyrs and set themselves on fire and do those things. These people are not afraid to die. They don't care if they die. They don't care how they die. So what's to say that there's not going to be just, somebody in our own country that's just going to strap a bomb to themselves and just bomb the place? I mean, I wouldn't put it past them to do something like that.
Yeah, there was an attack this morning in Michigan. I don't know whether it was related or...
It was at a church, outside of a Christian church.
Wayne County, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Wayne County, right?
Hey, if they're strapping bombs on themselves and then killing other people, why do we call that a suicide bomber? Why don't we call those homicide bombers?
Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you want to be a suicide bomber, if you want those 72 virgins, just go, strap it to yourself, stay in your fucking living room, and then just blow yourself up. If you go kill other people, you're not a suicide bomber, you're a homicide.
Yeah. So.
Roger, you understand the answer for that. I mean, I understand what you're saying, because from law enforcement, they're trying to define, differentiate someone that's actually going to kill themselves in the process, rather than somebody who's trying to commit basically the same crime, but preserve their own life, so they can understand. There's a differential there.
Correct, but I think the terminology helps to make certain people look like, I gave my own life, and we put the emphasis on their life. I would just prefer to put the emphasis on the victim's life.
I agree. No, but that shooting at the church, I don't think that was related. I mean, it could be. I don't know. That's kind of crazy, though. It was right south of Dearborn, just north of Detroit.
Which is Elon Omar, right, or whatever the fuck her name.
What? Where she resides?
No, where she, it's not where she resides, it's her district, right?
Her district.
I think so.
Yeah, her district. Yeah, but she doesn't, but her office is not there. Imagine that. How sad though.
Yeah, I'm typically against the U.S. getting involved in things. I'm typically against the president working unilaterally. I didn't like the AUMF. I'm not a real fan of a lot of these things. That being said, I do think that there are times when desperate times call for desperate measures, and I think the world is correct, the civilized world, when they say that a nuclear-armed Iran is a big fucking problem. And if we could prevent that, I think we should. And so, despite the fact that if this was any other nation in the world, if you would have said, oh, hey, we're going to Congo, I would have said, this doesn't sound like a good idea. But it's Iran. And surprise, surprise, the person that is typically the least hawkish in these situations, it's fucking Iran. So if we've got them on the ropes, I think we should consider hitting them again. That's what happens when they're on the ropes. Is you don't let them off the ropes to get a breather. The other thing that I'm really hopeful for, I don't know if it's going to happen. Maybe those of you that are smarter than I am, more informed, what are the Iranian people going to do? Are they going to rise up? Are they going to seize the opportunity to say now is the fucking time? Because I don't believe that regime change is the responsibility of Israel or the United States. I think the stated goals of making sure that they are not nuclear armed, I think those are good goals. While I would like to see regime change, I think the responsibility of changing that regime should come from within it.
Yeah, I'd like to speak on that a little bit. This is just coming from some of the people I spoke with within Iran. For a couple things. A lot of the people of Iran don't have weapons. That's one thing. And a lot of people in Iran, they're actually very peaceful people. And they're not really the type of people that will want to even try that. So one thing that has been brought to my attention by a few people, the best thing we could do is stop making deals with the dictatorship for cheap oil prices. Us and a lot of other countries. That's the best thing we could do. That's according to just a few people, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of mixes within the individuals in Iran. And yeah, I think most of us would like for the people of Iran and for other countries a change in the dictatorship. But how can that be done? Because I don't think the U.S. should get involved. I mean, we have a horrible track record of forced, regime changes. Look at Afghanistan right now. I mean, there's a whole. I believe, not just I believe, this is something I used to study. It's like when you try to force something like that, it's going to create more rebel groups, more extremist groups. And in one of my, was this a correct method about going to send those bombs? I don't know. Now, I wouldn't recommend it. There's a couple ways. Some people are also saying they already moved the stuff and they already anticipated this was going to come. They moved the stuff like 3 days ago. Is that true? I don't know. That's just what people are saying. Could that be false? 100%. And also, is this going to provoke them more to actually say, you know what, we should actually build some shit ASAP? Time will tell to see how effective this is.
Wait, so are you of the opinion that their position was like, hey, we should just kind of like tease them with the idea of wanting a bomb, but now that they've attacked us, now we should go forward with a weapons program? Is that what you?
No, I don't know. They may have already had some. I cannot say for sure what the hell they had. Or their intentions. I have no way of knowing. But also, I don't also believe the Israel government and what they said either. So I don't trust Iran's government either, or dictatorship either. So I'm definitely not that viewpoint. I just don't know, and I think a lot of us don't know. There's a lot of speculation. So I was going to bring up something else. Can't remember what it is, and if I remember it.
Cool. We got a couple new people that jumped up here. Qbert, interesting. I was very good at that game when it first came out. Qbert, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I thought that Qbert would appeal to you. I suspected you were in the demographic that played the game back in the day.
If I was given an option to bet on it, I would have fucking said it was you. Welcome to the stage.
So before I say what I have to say, I haven't seen you leading rooms in a long time. Have you been leading rooms on another platform you want to tell us about?
I've been leading myself to casinos and gambling. I've been leading myself to Mexican food and eating. I've just been doing everything except for jumping on social media. In fact, I just reactivated an old Twitter account today just so I could see people cry on Twitter.